The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Hello folks, welcome back to Shropshire again. Now in this episode we will actually get a little walk. It's amazing. We're 3 episodes in and we haven't really walked around at all yet, have we? Well, this place is definitely more of a village than the ones you've seen so far. Now, in this village there's a cross. You see that cross right there? That is on a very nice village green. Now what that cross signifies is that this place used to be more important than Market Drayton. Can you believe that? Welcome to Adderley. Adderley, Ealdthrift's Clearing. Today on TVI we're in Adderley, which is described on the village's very own website as a nice place to be. I reckon that could well be right, because it has a ton of features that make it lovely. The one that sticks out for me is the Shropshire Union Canal, which borders the village to the east. The lockkeeper on the canal in Adderley thought so too, and once decked out the banks of it with a floral display that won him and the canal an award. Adderley is only a small village in the grand scheme of things, but this place used to be more important than Market Drayton. In the older part of the village there's a green upon which you can find a cross. That was a market cross, and it would have been well known to people that passed through Adderley from Nantwich to the Midlands. You see, it was on a major salt route, and so trade was once thriving here. The west of the parish was once dominated by 2 huge parklands, which were conjoined at one point. They belonged to 2 of the wealthiest families Shropshire has ever known. One of them originated in Northern Ireland, and they owned Shavington Hall. The other were the Corbets, who came from France with the Normans. They were associated with Adderley Hall and lent their name to several landmarks around the village. They include Raven House, thanks to the derivation of their family name. So let's have a look at Adderley and see it all. Here's what Adderley Parish looked like in 1900. It was a mixture of farmland and parkland at this time, with the western sections dominated by the latter. That was all owned by the estates of Adderley Hall and Shavington Hall, where the 2 most important families here lived. Adderley had a railway line which you can see on this map. It skirted the edge of the village on its route between Nantwich and Market Drayton. There was a station here, but both it and the line have since disappeared, lost in some places under some modern housing. The village itself was only a small thing between the line and the swathes of parkland. It was a linear affair based mainly around the edge of the parkland on what would become the modern A529. Don't let its size back then put you off. This was a very important little village. If we zoom in, you can see here it had a few bits of note. In particular, the south was fairly built up, mainly around the Church of St Peter and the green just to the north of it. This area is the oldest part of Adderley, and it has most of the listed buildings in the village today. Further north it was a bit more sporadic, but there were little clusters of settlement, notably one near the railway station, which is marked here. This house on the corner was of great importance. It used to be a pub, but during World War I it became a military hospital. Look to the left and you can see there's a school. That's still there and it's still going. Quite a lot of Adderley's modern history is linked to Adderley Hall. That's no longer standing. It had to be demolished in 1955. Bits of its parkland are still here, but a lot has returned to agriculture. And so this is what it all looks like now. Adderley is a modern village which has been transformed from a linear one into a cluster of 20th century housing. Effectively, it's a pear-shaped village now, but most of its good bits are still on the A529. Our route around this one will include a substantial walk. I know, what is this sorcery? It'll be the first time we've had a proper amble around a Shropshire village. After driving through Spoonley and Tittenley, we'll have a quick look at Shavington Park to start off with. Then we're on foot from the church at Adderley, heading north via the A529 to Raven House. Between those 2 points, we'll pass the village hall, the bowls club, and a host of other notable features, such as the old market cross and church farmhouse. To go back south, we'll need to head east briefly to check out the railway cutting and the site of the Motte and Bailey Castle that Adderley used to have. The rest is residential as we form a loop back to the church. The finish will see us go to the former Adderley Wharf on the Shropshire Union Canal. Before we get to Adderley, we have to drive through 2 little hamlets which the parish also covers. First up we have Spoonley, which is almost joined to Market Drayton. It's something and nothing, this place. It appears on the map, but it's not got a lot of note. Spoonley was formerly a township in the ancient parish of Adderley, and it consisted of little more than just a handful of farms. Not a lot has changed, it's still a rural hamlet which probably has far more sheep and cows than it does humans. Let's drive up to hamlet number 2. Now, don't laugh at the name of this one. This is Tittenley, which is very similar to Spoonley. It's basically farms and a lot of farmland again. That said, Tittenley also has a couple of very impressive buildings. We're about to pass through 2 of them on either side of the road. They're known as the Tittenley Lodges, and between them they account for 4 of the listed buildings of Adderley Parish. The lodges are a surefire way to know that you're entering an estate, and you most definitely are here. It's not Adderley though. After driving through the lodges, you're heading for Adderley if you follow the road to the right. To the left though, there's another road and it goes to Wilksley. Along that road is the entrance to a huge parkland. It goes by the name of Shavington Park, and it used to contain Shavington Hall. Shavington Hall was a former country house originally built in 1506 by the Needham family, who were later styled the Viscounts Kilmorey and Earls of Kilmorey. They had acquired the manor of Shavington in 1461. There can be no doubt that the Needhams were a wealthy lot. They were at one time the richest family in Shropshire, and the size of their home here went a long way to proving that. The house was already pretty grand in the 16th century, but they didn't stop there. It was rebuilt on a grander scale in 1685 by the 6th Viscount and became their official English seat. I use the word English there because the family were, and still are, based in Northern Ireland. They come from Newry in County Down. The 17th century iteration of the hall was eventually sold off by the 3rd Earl in 1885 to Arthur Pemberton Heywood Lonsdale, the High Sheriff of Shropshire, for 1888. The Heywood Lonsdales improved the hall upon purchase and bought several adjoining estates. However, nothing remains of Shavington Hall anymore. In a familiar tale for English country houses, it was demolished in 1959 because it became far too expensive to maintain. The massive 600-acre park it sat within, though, is still very much here, and it's still private land. Okay, we've made it into Adderley village now, and I'm currently standing in the churchyard. The church is behind me, and that's our start point here for this little gentle walk around. Now, it's due to rain at some point today, but at the moment it's holding off. There's a bit of bright blue sky over in that direction over there, and it looks quite light across there, so it's not going to rain just yet. So I'm going to do this one without my coat on. Hopefully it doesn't start to bucket it down by the time I get back to the church later. We will see. Let's go walking. We start our main walk at what is literally the largest landmark in Adderley today. This is the Church of St Peter on the A529 at the southwestern tip of the village. This might look like a normal rural church, but it's a bit of a strange one. Only part of it is in use. There's been Christian worship on the site of St Peter's Church for over 1,000 years, and it continues to this day. It holds special services through the year, including those at Harvest, Remembrance and Christmas, and of course its ever popular Easter sunrise service. The nave and the tower are the only bits of it which are considered to be active. The chancel and the transepts are redundant, and as such they're under the care of the church's Conservation Trust. I don't think I've ever come across a church setup quite like that before. The interior was divided in about 1970 for the nave to continue in use as a place of worship and the rest of the church to be preserved by the CCT. The church's own records indicate this arrangement was formalised in 1956, but I guess it took 14 years to be put into practice. The oldest part of this church is the north transept, which was built in 1635 and 36 as a burial chapel for the Needham family, the Viscounts Kilmorey of Shavington. The tower is the second oldest part, built as it was in 1712. The rest of the church came along in 1801. The remainder was built by the architect Richard Baker, a name you won't be familiar with. That's because this church is his only known work. It's constructed of a yellowy grey sandstone, although the tower does feature some red sandstone as well, for a bit of character. In terms of stained glass, there are 12 heraldic panels here containing the Needham family arms. The oldest monument is a brass dating from about 1390. Another brass commemorates Sir Robert Needham, who died in 1556, and his wife Agnes, who died in 1560. There are two structures in the churchyard that are listed Grade 2. One is a mounting block dating from 1774, and the other is a red sandstone shaft, the remaining part of a former 18th century sundial. The sundial itself was stolen a number of years ago, and it's never been recovered. Now, in front of the church there's a modest village green. On it there's a stone column which looks like it might have been very important for some reason once upon a time. In actual fact, this column is proof that Adderley was once more important than Market Drayton. In centuries past, Adderley rivaled Market Drayton in terms of size. These days, there's no comparison. Market Drayton is a decent-sized town. However, Adderley once had an advantage. It lay on the salt route between the Midlands and Nantwich, which was a major salt-producing town. There was, therefore, a steady stream of pack animals that came through Adderley on a regular basis, and so trade was absolutely booming. This stone column is the only remaining part of Adderley's former market cross, which used to be situated on the corner of Rectory Lane. Okay, so let's walk on up the A529 then into Adderley village. Most of this village is new, or should I say modern, not new as such. It's been around for a few years, but the road is where it mainly grew up along. And there's some nice buildings along this road, aside from the church, which you've just seen. This house right here is a good example. It's got a few windows boarded up, as you can see. A couple there, one in the corner there. But this one is one that people know around here, because as you come into the village on the A529, it's one you have to pass. Let's head north, and next to see is the massive frontage of Church Farmhouse, a 3-storey monolith of a building that was built in 1790. This is one of the 26 listed buildings in Adderley Parish. Incidentally, the only one that's Grade 1 listed is St Peter's Church. Close to Church Farmhouse, there was once a post office which doubled as a stagecoach post, often dealing with the changing of horses on the Shrewsbury to Nantwich route. It would eventually close and fall into disrepair before being restored and sold as a private dwelling in the 1960s. The post office then moved here to number 9 Adderley and became a general stores run by Tom and Betty Butter in the late 1960s. The general stores closed in 2010 and it's now a private dwelling known as Postbox Cottage. When Adderley was dealing with the pack horses from Nantwich, the main road through the village was the absolute dead centre of trade. There was once a smithy along its route, vital of course for the horses. There was also once a timber yard between the blacksmiths and Church Farmhouse. These days, with horses long gone, a different kind of horsepower provides people with transport through the village. No surprise then that Adderley Garage exists on the A529. It's the only business along the old pack horse route these days. A few more steps and we come to the Bowls Club on the right. As a subsection of Adderley Village Hall, this green is open all year round for its members. It has adequate facilities for both recreational and competitive bowlers. Adderley has at least 10 different teams. Wowzers. Adderley doesn't have a great deal of local facilities, but among them is that village hall. This opened in 1921 as a memorial to the local men who died in World War I. The men are commemorated on a brass tablet indoors. The hall replaced a club room which had become inadequate for village needs. Okay, so we're about to go around a left-hand bend in the road, and this is going around the edge of some what is now agricultural land mostly, but this had a different purpose once upon a time, and the big giveaway here is the wall that you can see there. This was the edge of some more parkland. It didn't belong to Shavington, instead it belonged to Adderley. After the bend in the road at the northern end of the village, look to your left and you'll see a drive. This was an entrance to Adderley Hall, the parkland of which still remains on the Shropshire landscape to the west of the village. Adderley Hall was no Shavington, but it was still a historic country house. There were 2 Adderley Halls, in fact. The first house was burned down and a new one replaced it in Victorian times, completed as it was in 1879. The replacement has now gone too. It was demolished in 1955. The estate's grounds now consist of largely arable farmland, but the north and south lodges remain as tangible links with the demolished house. Whilst there's not a lot of recorded history about the first house, which caught fire, we do know a lot about the Victorian replacement. The new hall was to be associated with another very important and wealthy family, the Corbets. The surname is of French origin. It comes from the word corbe, which means raven in French. That's why the symbol on the Corbet family crest is a black raven. They trace their ancestry to 2 barons found in the Domesday Book and probably derive from the Brereton and Essay region near Sees in Normandy. The Corbet family became one of the most powerful and richest of the landed gentry in Shropshire. The Shropshire Archives holds a collection of materials on the building of the new hall, a project that was undertaken by Henry Reginald Corbet. He called upon the architect George Davy to inspect the old house and make it habitable again. Davy concluded that little could be done on account of its condition after the fire and recommended it should be pulled down. In its place would be a new hall placed on an elevated position to the northwest of the original. The first part of the new hall to be constructed was the cellars, which reused materials from the old hall's demolition. The rest of the building was made of red bricks, which mostly came from a local brickworks, a hole somewhere between the church and a pool, according to records. Its windows and coping stones were made from the former portico columns that formed the entrance of the old hall. These were used because the stone was of a much higher quality than what could be purchased from the local quarry. Adderley Hall might still be standing today if the same attention to quality had been upheld throughout the rest of the house. Some sources indicate that rotten flooring would lead to the eventual demise of the property some 60 years after it was built. Architects reckon it could have been a wooden partition that was used to hold up the weight of the grand tiled roof that may have led to structural issues and rot. Rot was indeed a factor in the decision to demolish it in 1955. And so Adderley Hall is now just a distant memory. 3 years after the hall came down, the Corbet family sold the land it stood on. Aside from the entrance drive, one of the only other reminders it was ever here would be the old barns, which have now been turned into dwellings themselves.
Right, now next we're going to see a building that sports the Raven name. Raven, of course, being related to the Corbet family who were involved with the hall and the Parkland that you've just learned about. Behind me here on Station Road, there's a house on the corner, which you can only partially see. You can see the end gable of it there. The rest of it is behind this hedge. This is Raven House.
Station Road now, and this big white building on the corner is called Raven House. It was built in 1824 and originally it was 3 houses. Behind the house is a courtyard, a barn and 3 farm labourers' cottages. In the late 1880s it was a pub, probably called the Raven Arms or the Raven Inn. Owned privately by the Corbet estate, Mrs. Catherine Corbet lent Raven House to the Red Cross for use as a military hospital during wartime. It was known as the Raven House Auxiliary Hospital, and it was for convalescing soldiers in World War I. Approximately 150 of them passed through Raven House. It was closed in September 1917 as it was too small for any further army use. In the November, Raven House became an Edith Cavell home of rest for nurses. About 600 nurses stayed there in its 10 years of service before finally closing down in 1927. Today, it's just another residence. This is the site of the former Adderley railway station, built by the Nantwich and Market Drayton Railway in the early 1860s. It opened in 1863, one day after the station at Market Drayton. The line was, from the start, run by the Great Western Railway. After nationalisation in 1948, it became part of British Railways, and it was eventually closed in 1963 by the British Railway Board. Although passenger trains ended in that year, freight trains were still running through Adderley until 1967. At the very end, it was almost a major event every time a train came through the village. Children would rush to the fence to watch it and duly get covered in smoke. The freight trains they would be seeing would be carrying things like farm machinery and livestock. Following the final closure of the line, the process of track lifting began in the late 1960s. A lot of the sleepers were sold to local farmers who found use for them in building farm structures. The railway cuttings, or batters as they were sometimes known, were all sold off. Some were bought by local farmers where they bordered their land, whilst others were bought by villagers who decided to build houses on them. With the ever-decreasing use of the tracks, the batters had become something of a playground for children before they were repurposed. Today, the railway cutting has become a wildlife sanctuary for many animals, including badgers, foxes, rabbits, stoats, weasels, pheasants, finches, and other birds. There were a number of goats belonging to Poole House who once thrived living on the railway banks by the station.
Now, the railway bridge is as far as we can walk on Station Road, but the road does carry on a bit further. It's a private drive though, so we can't walk down there. Now, if we could walk down there, we might see the site of a castle, and I found a bit of information about this. It's a bit annoying that I can't see it, but at least I can tell you about it.
Now, speaking of Poole House, that's over the railway cutting to the east. It's a notable area because it sits on and around what used to be a castle. Today up there are some earthworks and buried remains of both the castle and an 18th century ice house. The castle is believed to have been the principal holding of the Norman lord of the manor. In the early 12th century, that title was held by the Dunstanville family. A roughly circular, steep-sided glacial mound about 7 metres high was adapted and used to form the castle's motte. It's surrounded by undulating land and is approximately 65 metres in diameter at its base and 35 metres across the top. The summit of the motte is flat, but rises gradually from the northwest to the southeast. Quarrying for sand in modern times has modified the eastern and western parts of it. In the early 20th century, shards of 13th century pottery and part of a rim of a bronze cauldron were found at it. They appear to have been associated with a charcoal-rich deposit and burnt soil, suggesting that the structures that sat on top of the motte were burnt down at some point. In the 18th century, a brick-built ice house was inserted into the southeastern side of the mound. It was a type known as a cup and dome ice well. It served as the ice store for Poole House, a farmhouse of 16th or maybe 17th century date. Ice was probably obtained from a pond to the south. From here on in, it's a case of working our way back to the start, using the residential areas that lie between the old railway line and the main road where the church and the village hall both are. Adderley has seen a lot of infilling in recent times, as you're about to see. The south of the housing estate, which Adderley has become now, is marked by Rectory Lane. Here's a curious fact for you. Adderley once had two rectories. In 1789, Squire Sir Corbet agreed with Reverend Robert Clive, rector of Adderley Church, to replace the original rectory at Adderley Hall. The idea was to build a new rectory in the village, which ironically is now known as the Old Rectory. There's a newer one still called Cobscot Hay, which was built in 1866. It was the home of Athelstan Corbet, but later passed out of church hands in 1954, and it's been a private residence ever since. It's good to see, though, that it's never forgotten its connection to the Corbet family. The central street on the estate that's now in the middle of the village is called Corbet Drive, a hat tip to Henry, the man who wanted Adderley Hall rebuilt.
Okay, it's just started to rain. As I said, it is due at some point today. It's not terribly heavy at the moment, but I have taken shelter here in the book exchange. I'm going to run back to the car and then I'm going to drive down to the last thing in Adderley Village that we still need to cover, and that's the school. After that, we'll then head down towards the canal, and that's another episode in the books.
There's one thing we haven't seen in the village, and that's the school. It's located at the very northern edge of Adderley, and it was much easier to drive to this than walk to it, even though it's not all that far away from the drive we saw opposite Raven House. Adderley Church of England Primary School sits opposite the entrance to the Hall's Barns. It's a Victorian building that dates back to 1858. There were two schools in Adderley at one time. There was another one that originally served as Adderley Hall's garden house and laundry house. So to finish with, we need to have a look at the Shropshire Union Canal, which flanks the village to the east. Adderley once had a wharf on the canal, which had its own smithy and 2 lime kilns. None of that sort of industry is here anymore. The most you'll find are houses and a winding hole. If you were around for episode number 1 of this series, you'll already know a bit about the canal. The Shropshire Union, or the Shroppy as a lot of people know it, started life in 1797 and wasn't fully completed until 1835. It's over 66 miles long, end to end. The Adderley stretch was built as part of the Birmingham and Liverpool Junction Canal, the Act for which was passed in 1826. It was among the last sections to be completed. It was then absorbed by the Ellesmere and Chester Canal in 1845 before becoming part of the Shropshire Union in 1846. The Adderley stretch has several bridges which all carry Grade 2 listings. They were all built in around 1830 by the engineers Thomas Telford and Alexander Easton. The one we're stood on here is Adderley Wharf Bridge. There are also locks on this stretch too. A man called Frank Butter was once the lockkeeper at Adderley. A former farm worker, he transformed the areas around the locks and the bridges into lawns and garden beds, spelling out the name Adderley in red, white and blue flowers on an embankment. His efforts won him the British Waterways National Competition and the Northwich Divisional Competition for the best maintained locks. Now, if only every lock on the canals of Britain had something like that, we'd really have a waterway network to be truly proud of. Okay, so that's 3 down in Shropshire. We're doing well, aren't we? And we finally got a decent walk in at last. Tomorrow we're going for a proper walk as we hit the first large-ish village in the county. Get ready for the tale of the braiding stone on the village green and how it was once used. just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.